Welcome to Credit Chats, where we deep dive into the financial maze and uncover how everything from your daily coffee to your dream home impacts your credit score. I'm LeBaron, and thank you for joining us. Each episode will explore the ins and outs of personal finance, hear from experts, and answer your questions. So tune in, take notes, and transform your financial journey with us. Let's get started. Hey guys, we are here with Dr. June C. Christian, and she is the visionary founder behind Pineapple Lampshade, which is a bespoke consultancy specializing in leadership development and cultural transformation with a PhD in leadership and policy and over 2 decades of experience across education, tech, retail, and nonprofits. Dr. June combines cutting-edge research with deep intuition to empower leaders from underrepresented backgrounds. Her work focuses on helping clients unlock their true potential, navigate complex challenges, and lead with authenticity. Dr. June is passionate about creating spaces where leaders can thrive, break barriers, and achieve lasting, meaningful change. Welcome, Dr. June.
Thanks, LeBaron. I appreciate you having me here. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for accepting the invite to be on the show.
That's-
So tell us what your business is and briefly describe what you do and what are the main services you offer as your business.
Sure. So, to tell you a little bit about Pineapple Lampshade, it is a bespoke consultancy. And ultimately, what that means is that there isn't a solution where one size fits all. So,
Right.
we are offering solutions, whether it's for individual leaders or it's for small businesses or micro businesses, offering them HR solutions to better help them lead and position them in ways that feel good to them, as opposed to looking for a leadier leader, right, to tell them what they should be doing in their business. Business should feel good. So ultimately, we offer a variety of services as it impacts those businesses. So coaching, we also look at the co-founder relationship. About 50%
Mm-hmm.
of businesses that are formed each year are formed in partnership. And of those co-founder partnerships, about 70% of those relationships fail and those
Mm,
business partnerships fail. And so there really has to be some intentional conversation with regard to how founders are understanding who they are in the business, what the business is, and what do we do if we have to dissolve the partnership due to some unforeseen circumstance. So I like to think of myself as the marriage counselor of co-founders. And then I also love to get up on stage and I love to facilitate a workshop. So cultural humility, leadership, and also the joy in the journey, right? Being able to
right.
not only show up with authenticity, but to find joy in the process.
That's great. And a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on the communication part of it when you're co-founders, because that's oftentimes as big a relationship as marriage is.
Of course.
So because you mix in money and you mix in communication and you mix in, and those are the two biggest reasons for marriages failing. I like to joke around, my dad joke is the biggest reason for divorce is marriage. But that's the dad joke part of it. But the two biggest reasons honestly are money, finances, and communication.
Yep.
So
For the co-founder relationship, it's a lack of trust or a lack of communication. And I would say that a lack of trust is probably rooted in a lack of communication.
right. And one thing that me and my wife have been doing, because I mean, you have to be intentional when it comes to communication. Like
Mhm.
you have to seek out ways to be a better communicator. Because honestly, a lot of us didn't learn these things coming up. Either you were in a household where you didn't talk about it, or you were in a household where you yelled at people because of things that happened. So
Right.
we didn't learn good communication skills when we were coming up, and then we also didn't learn good interpersonal. Well, most of us didn't learn good interpersonal skills. So if you were fortunate enough to come up in a household with a therapist as a mom or dad, then you might have been taught these things, but a lot of us did not learn these things when we were growing
Sure.
up. So
Well,
that
and
is
no, I was thinking, and in our primary relationships, ultimately with our parents, they parents intuit the needs of their children because that you have to. So we often have this idea that people should just know what we need
Yeah.
because that's been our experience, and especially in our primary relationships when that's not true. And so
Right.
how do we have difficult conversations when there isn't a power dynamic where you're positioned as a child and you're speaking to an adult? So how do we communicate as peers? And we often aren't given the opportunity even just to practice.
Right, right, or communicate at all. Because, like I was saying before, like one of the things me and my wife were doing, because I saw it on Instagram somewhere where you over communicate just to make sure your point is conveyed. Of saying, and one of the examples I used was saying something like, "Why'd you leave that toothpaste there?" So that could go one of two ways when somebody's receiving that. So you have to over communicate. Okay, why'd you leave that toothpaste there? Because I don't want to put it away if you need it again. And that's
Mm,
a better way to say what you're thinking and not make them guess what you're thinking, because they could they
sure.
could think automatically, well, you think I'll leave the toothpaste out, like you just want me to clean up. So,
Right.
and I mean, that's honestly what your parents would have said too, is like, why
Sure.
do you leave this out? And that's where we go back to, from a place of not being healed as younger selves. So
Yeah. That's brilliant. Like I love that not being healed as your younger self. And so then you allow your parts to take over it when you're relating to the people who are most important to you, in part because those parts feel safe to come out,
right,
but they often aren't in service of the relationship.
right, right. And you oftentimes hurt the people that are closest to you because of that kind of interaction. So
Absolutely.
so let's get to your origin story of what inspired you to become this business partnership therapist. And I mean, I know I dumbed that down. I know that's not all you do. You do a
Okay.
whole lot more than that. But what inspired you? What's your origin story?
So I've done a little bit of everything. I think I worked as a legal assistant. I was a teacher, a middle school teacher, because I like attitude. I don't like either of the bookends as much.
Hmm.
Um, and I worked in corporate and I've worked in nonprofits.
Right,
So I've been able to see how systems function. I've been able to not only see it, but really experience it, right? Because the system was acting on me. And so, considering the work that I've done, what I would tell you about my doctoral work is ultimately I have a graduate certificate in American Culture Studies, and that's the most important, in my estimation, the most important piece of education that I've gotten, and being able to understand culture, not just on a macro level, like how we're relating to each other as citizens of the United States
right.
with similar identities,
Hmm.
but also at the micro level. So what that looks like in relationship in a co-founder relationship. And so when I think about all of the things that I've done over the course of my life, I've facilitated a lot of workshops where people will say to me, "You changed my life." And that's not I don't believe that I changed anyone's life. I think that ultimately when you get into a place where you're able to reflect on your behavior, on your actions, on your thoughts, on the things that you say in real time, it shifts your perspective because then you're not confronting your perception of someone else. You're confronting the reality of who you are in any given moment. And so I started thinking, I left my job at Starbucks because I really I created this wonderful program that I won't get into because that's protected by work product. But ultimately what I walked away from that experiencing knowing is that folks need better opportunities to practice communication.
Right, right.
um, and not only do they need those opportunities, but they're actually thirsty for them. And when you
Mm,
create spaces for people to better understand who they are and to have very real conversation, because often what stops us from having real conversation is our fear of how the other person will receive us or the things that they'll
mhm,
say to
mm,
us in response. And so
mhm.
when you get over the fact that I don't want to say that everybody has a complaint, but there's always room for growth. There's
Right.
always another step you can take to be a better communicator.
Mhm.
And my thought is, regardless of whether you're doing that in a sheltered relationship like a marriage or a family in terms of counseling, there also has to be some kind of, well, let me back up. When you're doing that kind of sheltered work, right, in a family,
Hmm.
it's going to impact how you work professionally.
Right.
The converse is also true. So if you're not getting it at home, you definitely need it professionally, especially as you said earlier, the co-founder relationship is of the utmost importance because it actually funds your primary relationship with your spouse, partner, and potentially the people who depend on you.
Right.
So there my thought was, how do we help ensure that relationship takes care of itself, that the communication is clear, and that folks feel equipped with the skills to communicate well. So, oh, and also wanting to do that most expressly for underrepresented groups,
Hmm.
specifically because of the gaze of systems. So these are systems that were created without us, with not
Right.
with an intention to quote unquote exclude us, but without any envisioning of us ever taking part, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that's any historically excluded group.
Hmm.
So that being said, there is a unique and complex lens for that relationship. So, how does society perceive you? That's going to impact how you show up in your business. It's also going to show up in how you communicate with the person that you're sharing this business relationship
Right.
with. And so, really getting to understand who you are, how you show up, and how your perception of
Hmm.
yourself and the other person is actually what you're engaging with and not the reality. So when you're clear about that, I think it helps to decenter the feeling of being attacked in communication so that you
Hmm.
can show up authentically and you can find the joy in the partnership, which is what you started it for in the first place.
Right. Right. Because you wanted to continue the good vibes that you felt from being friends, and then you wanted to take it a step further. Well, if we're friends, we can make money together.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really good. All right. What are some of the common issues you encounter when working with business partnerships, and how do you approach resolving them?
I would tell you, I think that there is a happy bubble, right?
Hmm.
I related a lot to the marriage relationship. So it's the honeymoon phase.
Right.
So I like you like me. We are in the process of creating. We are starting to make a little bit of money. Everything is wonderful. And then the first real communication hurdle comes. And
Hmm.
there is typically resentment that gets harbored, right? Because we
Right.
haven't had a difficult conversation, not for real. We haven't
Hmm.
had a difficult conversation yet. And so, in our first difficult conversation, we don't really resolve the issue. It's typically one person bends more than the other person because
Hmm.
that's how friendships work. There's an ebb and a flow in friendships. And then there's just this tinge of resentment that gets harbored, and then we move on to the next thing, and then we move on to the next thing, and so we keep building up resentment until there feels like there's a break in communication, or
Right.
there is a lapse of trust because there hasn't been authentic communication.
Hmm.
So ultimately, what I like to do is I've designed these 6 dates
Hmm.
that co-founders can go on where they're having difficult conversations that encourages them to look at their identities. How are your identities impacting the conversations that you have, right? So if you've got a dynamic between a male or a man and a woman,
Hmm.
co-founders, right? There's going to be some identity stuff that comes up because we've all internalized these ideas around what these identities mean and the expectations that we have based on those stereotypes, even if we don't want to, right? Because
Right.
it's in the air that we breathe.
Right.
So having them to discuss how identity plays a part in their communication and then getting to the root of how do we communicate? What needs to be in place? How do we establish a protocol for
Hmm.
communication moving forward? And then one of the huge conversations that needs to be had is what happens if someone needs to exit the business? So ultimately, when you're in that honeymoon phase, you don't think about, oh, someone's going to want to exit. But there are so many reasons why that could happen. There
Yeah.
could be an illness in someone's family,
Yeah.
right? Someone could lose passion for the business. They may be unable to work in the business anymore.
Hmm.
And so really being intentional about having these difficult conversations and making space to revisit, what does our communication look like? Right? How can we get better at communicating with each other? That's typically what I go through, helping to facilitate those conversations so that when the resentment comes up, because oftentimes we don't look at resentment or frustration or anger or desperation or desolation in our relationships as those things, right? It is
Right.
somebody's attitude that connects with us. And so, how
Right.
do we understand that attitude might come up and we can shift to a place where, what are we really trying to say? What are we hoping to get out of the conversations that we have? And how can we ensure that our co-founder relationship is solid and that we have a semblance of a friendship that we recognize from when we first.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think inherently we believe coming up that conflict is bad, which it's not really the conflict that's bad. It's the way you convey the message. So conflict is not inherently bad. Like you're going to disagree with people. And that's how you get to the truth of a situation. And that's how you get to compromise. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't get there unless you have conflict. So conflict is good inherently.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So how did you build your client base and how do you plan on making it grow?
So I'm still in the space of growth.
Okay.
Um, Ultimately, while I understand that social media isn't necessarily a marketing strategy, what I've done is leveraged across a variety of social media outlets,
Mhm.
primary being LinkedIn. And also what I've done is folks that I know that are that have this dynamic, reaching out to them and asking them, are you open to having someone facilitate conversation with you so that this relationship can get better and it can
Right.
continue to iterate in ways that feel good to everyone involved. I think beyond that, leveraging my personal network and then also using social media in very direct ways, intentional ways, and then also doing a little bit cold calling. The other thing that I've really been enjoying is using artificial intelligence
Hmm.
to help me come up with what are some ideas. So, approaching a variety of organizations that actually target historically excluded groups and
Right.
going to them and saying, like, this is a pretty staggering statistic of the people who are assembled here. This co founder pair, 70% of them will not make it. And it's
Wow.
not because the business isn't profitable,
Right.
and being able to say, is there some kind of relationship that we can form so that co-founders can access
Right.
this important these
Mm.
communication tools so that they can have the business of their dreams and not the business of a nightmare.
Yeah. And I think, and I mean, we met on the blocks, and I know there's a lot of co-founders that end up on the blocks and things like that. So you may be able to utilize you being in that space, because I know there's a blocks Facebook group. And while social media may not be a marketing strategy, it is a visibility strategy.
Absolutely.
So there's ways for you to be visible on there, and then visibility can lead to profitability. So I don't think there would be any problem. I mean, of course, you have to ask the administrators of the blocks and whatnot, but I don't think there would be any problem with offering your services to people in there, because that's that's what's going to help them win beyond the things that we learned in the blocks on how to set up your business and make that successful. It's
Yep.
like there's another part for co-founders that is how to set up your partnership and make it successful as well.
Sure. And
So,
it will always be successful even if you part ways.
right, right.
And for a lot of people, I don't think that they anticipate that because they're in that, oh my gosh, my business is everything. And
Yeah,
it may not be all the time into
right,
perpetuity.
right. Yep. Just like writing a will. Like you don't want to talk about it, but it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
So what is the most difficult financial decision that you had to make in your business, and how did you navigate
Ooh,
that?
business is expensive.
It is.
I think there have been a number of investments that I've made. And I had I had to cut my losses in those
Mm,
relationships.
mm,
And those are probably the most difficult decisions that I've had to make. So I started out with one website developer. We were almost at the finish line. I go to the blocks, things shift, things change. I go back to the developer, and it was almost like, well, we're going to need to start over, not only in terms of the wireframe, but also in terms of the investment.
mm.
My thought was, this isn't serving me, right? Like, and
Yeah,
so we've been, I don't want to say that I've burned the relationship. I have a deep respect for them, but it didn't feel like the right relationship anymore.
yeah,
So I had to
yeah.
pivot and found another really wonderful website designer who's in Ghana, actually, and recognizing that now the price of my website has doubled.
Right.
Um, the other thing, I had a podcast producer. We have had to pivot our relationship, which impacts how people come to my brand and how people engage with me. And that pivot was a financial decision. And so it's those types of things. It's, am I making the right decision at the right time?
Yeah.
And cutting your teeth on spending money, or yeah, on spending money that you didn't intend on spending, right? Like, it's just
Hmm.
a business expense. Sometimes you're going to have to eat it and move on.
Yeah.
And really, that financial decision, the piece that underlies it for me is the fear, the regret, the frustration, a little bit of anger that comes up as a result of making this decision. Because,
Hmm.
I wouldn't go out to the store and buy broccoli and get halfway home, go return the broccoli to go get broccoli from another store. Like, that doesn't happen in my everyday life. So
Yeah.
those types, and it's also not the price of broccoli. Like, we're talking about thousands of dollars here.
Hmm.
So those are difficult decisions to make for me,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
made them. And I think I get stronger in recognizing what I have to have up front in order to
Hmm.
make the decision, as opposed to just being excited and, okay, I can work with this person, because that's
Hmm.
it's not always true.
Yeah. Yeah. And the psychology of the opportunity cost, and it's like giving yourself grace to look at it as a learning opportunity and not just a mistake that you made.
Yeah,
So when you start to look at things that may not serve you anymore, but now you know that it doesn't serve you, it still serves you, because
yeah,
now you know that it doesn't serve you. So you won't
absolutely.
make that mistake, or mistake is a strong word for that, but you won't make that decision again because you've already learned that one doesn't serve you.
Right, because
So,
it's always a question of, how is this contributing to my greater good, right?
right,
Like, how can I take this, learn from it, and things that I would tell entrepreneurs who are looking for website designers, right? Like, I've got a list of things to think through and to look at before you engage in relationship with a
right.
website designer. So at some point I'll likely be able to share that information, but also it gives me insight into how I make decisions.
Yeah, yeah. Is that in your playbook?
Not yet, but it should be.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thing that you can use, because that's knowledge that you gained, and I mean, people would readily pay for that. I mean, they pay $17 for that. It's like how to choose a website designer.
Mm,
So, I mean,
it's a great
that's
idea.
that's another way to make money in your sleep. Like, you already know it. Put it down and put it on your website. Have them purchase it. So, um, so, what advice would you give someone going into your field, particularly regarding financial planning and management?
So, because I offer a service-based business, I think that there's there may be a misconception that it is less expensive than, I don't want to say less expensive, because I think to some degree it is, than a product based business,
Hmm.
but that it is significantly less. And that is not true.
Hmm.
Right? So that there are a whole host of costs that you don't bank on, that you don't necessarily recognize that you need in a given moment. And while there are a lot of technologies that are one-stop shops, a lot of apps that are one-stop shops, there's still a number of apps that you're going to need to help you
Right.
in this digital age. And so those are the things that, a product-based business may not need, right?
Hmm.
But I definitely, there are um, uh, platforms that I'll need to provide so that folks can access in a way that I'm teaching, in a way that I provide workshops or facilitate workshops. All of those
Right.
things are top of mind, and you don't know what you need until you're in the situation where I need this particular piece of software or something that's going to fill in the gap. And so those like little costs
Yeah.
come up. And also, I think the other thing that we learned at the blocks, or at least definitely in Alpha Blocks, which is do as much as you can for as little as you can, get your product out. Just get it
Hmm.
out. Do
Yeah.
something immediately. Don't sit on it. Don't wait for it to be perfect. And I think that there's a financial planning piece in that, because if you're waiting for things to get perfect, then you're bordering on being a wantrepreneur.
Yeah.
Um, so what do you have to market? Put it to market. If people aren't buying it, pull it back. Figure out what you're going to do differently, and then put it back out again. And I wouldn't necessarily think of testing as a financial planning strategy. I think it definitely is one so that you can get money coming into the business. So
Hmm.
not this expectation of I've got to have, six figures in the bank. That would be lovely
Yeah.
to devote to the business. But if in the event that you don't have that, right, make sure that you have the basics of what you need. And you don't need, if there's a silver, gold, and platinum plan, you likely don't need the platinum plan, right? What can you get by on doing for free trials? But also recognizing a lot of those free trials run out expeditiously.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're putting something out in the market so that you can get that return.
Absolutely. And that's a lot of the reason that I even started the podcast. Like, I know I wasn't going to have like the best backgrounds or the most extensive software or anything like that, but getting the message out is more important than really the vehicle that it's getting out on. So the people that need this message they're gonna latch on to it, they're gonna use it, and it's gonna come at the right time for them. So just
Absolutely.
getting it out there is the main thing.
And you get that return. I think that's the beauty of it. So you're always going to have people who are early adopters,
Right.
people who are like, I'm here for the content and not the background. And so recognizing when you find your people, because those are literally the people who will be with you from the foundation to the
Yep.
to the finished product.
Yeah, the day ones.
Yeah.
Yep. So, how can someone use their financial struggles, like bad credit, as a learning experience in their leadership journey?
So I'll tell you, I this is a little personal, but I'm proud of what I've done. So I was living in Montgomery, New York, or Montgomery, Alabama, and I moved to New York City. And if you know anything about the apartment game or the property game in New York City, it is out of this world, right? So you can
Hmm.
see an apartment and 20 minutes later it's rented. And most of the folks in the city for the plum apartments, they're looking at credit scores of 700 or better,
Hmm.
right? I'm sure that people, I mean, I got an apartment and I didn't have 700, but there are lots of people who don't. But for those really beautiful apartments, that's what they're looking for.
Right.
When I went to New York, I didn't think my credit was great, but also didn't think it would be a 511.
Hmm.
So I think I had this idea. My mother's credit was near perfect. I'm
Hmm.
certain it was our whole lives, right? Like that's how she was an exceptional money manager, and I never saw myself that way, ever.
Right.
And I don't want to say that it was a thorn in my side, but it was kind of like, how can you be a leader if you can't get control over your credit situation, if you can't figure out how to move the needle on this? And
Hmm.
I did really well. I got my credit score up. I ended up to get an apartment. I actually had to write oh my goodness, it's my student loans that's pulling my
Yeah.
credit down. Please don't penalize me for this. You can
Hmm.
look my rental record. It's a really humbling letter
Mm-hmm.
to write. And I remember thinking I would never be in this position again. Fast forward, I leave New York. My mom's been diagnosed with dementia, and the bills are coming, but the money, I'm not established yet. So I found myself in a very similar position. I went to buy a house because I thought that I had enough credit to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and I was still in the high fives. But after I had raised the my credit score to 700, it
Mm-hmm.
dropped when I got back home. Even in the high fives, the mortgage lender said, I would nobody's going to give you a loan for this because you've got to have a 640 in order to get federal any kind of federal loan.
Yeah.
And so I thought, never again. I will never, ever, ever be in this place again. And I think the one thing that I love about my story is that if I do get back there again, I know how to get it back up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's diligence, it's
Yeah.
consistency, it's working with a goal in mind, which is just
Mm-hmm.
what leadership is, right?
And that's a
Like,
lot of what I do. Like, I know you, and I mean, you told the story perfectly as far as like what I do for other people. When I started this, I started to just fix credit because, like the gurus say, you can make all this money fixing credit. And even though, yes, that is true, you have to be in it for the long haul. So what I did was I switched to helping people understand what they were doing with their credit because now you have all the tools that you need to know how to dig yourself back out if you need to. And that's what people don't get when they just pay somebody to do it for them. And I'm a fan of paying somebody that's an expert at it to do things for you. But when you're going to have to go back to it or you're going to recurringly need to understand how that works, it's just like math. Like, you're going to have to understand how it works if you're going to keep using it. If you don't plan on using it anymore, you don't need to understand it.
right.
But the credit is different. Like, you're going to need to use it, and the stats on how many people that they require to understand even financial literacy, not even credit. When you're coming out of high school, it's 5%. 5% of high schools in America require that you take some sort of financial literacy before you get out of school,
That's right.
whereas 98% of credit reports have some sort of credit extended to them. So with that kind of stat that you have, there's an imbalance,
Mhm.
and they don't want you to understand it because they make money off of you not understanding that. So that's why I have switched my model to more so education, because people need the education more than they need the fixing of the credit for a one-time thing. So
Well,
um
and
so
to the question that you asked, I think that is ultimately leadership. The thing that I think we get confused is that management is not leadership, right?
right,
The ability to tell somebody what to do, that's not leadership.
right, right.
Leadership actually begins with yourself. So, how are you motivating yourself? How are you
Mm-hmm.
attending to the things that need to be attended to? I think that financial literacy and credit, that's a part of self care,
Right.
right? Because if you have to go somewhere real fast, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
you've got to get out of a house because the house exploded and you've got to get into an apartment, it makes it difficult. And especially when you have people who are depending on you.
Right,
And so when
right.
you think about how you're leading yourself, this is a representation of one of the facets of who you are. And so how are you taking up who you are and
Mm-hmm.
all of the avatars that are presented, and your financial health is a part of that. It's one of those avatars.
Right. Right. So, how does understanding one's personal credit and business credit impact leadership decisions, decision making in your line of work?
So I would say that what I find now is they're kind of synonymous,
Mm.
personal and business credit, but that's because I'm doing everything out of pocket right
Right.
now. And I'm hopeful that I'm understanding your question, but I think that it'll be relatively soon
Mm.
once the business starts making the money that will necessitate getting credit and leveraging that credit. I think it's the same as personal credit, right? Like
Right.
when you've got good credit and you're able to leverage that credit,
Hmm.
it becomes a way of making money for the business.
Right.
So when you've
Right.
got great business credit and you can go and get a building, not
Mm.
necessarily one that you live in or one that you're working in, but one that you can rent to other people. It
Yeah.
becomes those types, okay, so now you can use business credit in a way that helps to fuel your personal life,
Yeah.
um, in ways that are not illegal and that adhere to the tax code. But all of that to say is now you can use your personal credit for the things that you want to use it for,
Yeah.
and you're able to leverage your business credit in ways that feel good to you. And both of those things need to work in tandem, in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And not only is it legal and adheres to the tax code, but it actually reduces your taxable liability. So,
Mm. And that's
so
a big,
using, yeah,
because
because,
when anytime you're facilitating workshops, or at least for my peace of mind, I carry insurance for that, right? Because there are people who could potentially be impacted by the work that we do. And so I
mhm,
want to make sure that if anyone wants to hold me liable for the work that's being done, that I have coverage for that.
right. Right.
And so diminishing that liability so that I can ensure that, I don't go down with the business personally
Right.
should something happen is a asset in and of itself.
Good. Good. So, how do you help leaders navigate the stress and challenges that come with financial pressures like credit issues in their personal and professional lives?
Talk about it. That you've got to be able to talk about it. I think,
Yeah.
even the trepidation that I had with talking about my own credit profile once upon a time, right?
Hmm.
To be able, this is a culture, a country that really doesn't talk about money, right? Like
Right.
we know
Right.
about people who are doing really well, but that middle swat and the people who aren't doing well, who
Yeah.
need some type of
Yeah.
support. But that middle swath of people, it's a huge, huge
Hmm.
swath, right? Like we have no idea on either side what it looks like.
Yeah. And the fear mongering that they do with making you feel like you're alone. And that's the part that you have to understand. That's a trick for you to stay silent. Because just like SA, like sexual abuse, that
Mhm.
the trick is to make you stay silent so that they can keep doing what they're doing.
Exactly.
And if you speak up, or if you finally do realize that you're not alone, you get so much power from that.
Sure.
And
And it's the
yeah.
ability for someone to say, well, I I have a buddy LeBaron. You should go talk to LeBaron, right? Like he can help you, he can help get you right. But not only that, he's going to give you the skills that you need
Right.
in order to ensure that should you ever find yourself in this place again, that you know exactly what to do to reverse out of it. And so I think it's being able to talk about it, to ask for help, and to recognize that there's nothing dirty about it,
Right.
because it's to your point, only 5% of schools are requiring any kind of knowledge with regard
Hmm.
to taxes or credit or any of that. And so to have this expectation that once you turn 18, that you just know what to do with credit and what to do with money, and that you are financially literate, is a bunch of poppycock.
Yeah. Yeah. And the first thing that they shove in your face when you get on a college campus for a piece of pizza or a t-shirt is a credit card, because they know you don't know anything about it. But for you to not have, like you said, for you to not have to be required to take anything about taxes, to take anything about financial literacy, when they know, like, people joke about this, two things are certain: death and taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't understand those things, it's not and that's the main thing I think about too. It's not your fault that you don't understand them, but once you learn about it, then if you continue to not know about it, then yes, it is your fault after that.
Sure.
So
Fault or not, you'll still be held accountable, especially when it
right.
comes to taxes. So
Exactly.
the credit companies, the commercials that I hear when I'm in the car, I was $43,000 in debt. They were going to take my car. They were going to garnish my weight, like all of these things. I think that can be avoided, right?
Right.
And the other thing that I would say is, do you have a financial mentor? Do you
Hmm.
have someone that you can talk to, someone that you're looking to? They've got this experience. I want to model my financial health similarly. So how do I do that? In order to do that, you're not going to be able to learn all of it from the outside looking in. You're going to have to ask for some help.
Yeah. And it can be a symbiotic relationship. I know people, you reach up and you also reach down. Like there's going to be people that don't know as much as you. And for that to be true, all you need to know is a minute more than them. And then you can teach them what you knew a minute ago.
I would relate it back to my story, right? Like
Mhm.
whatever your struggle is, this can be um, your turnaround story, your comeback story. It is a testament to personal resilience. And I think for a lot of folks, it's really easy to give up on credit, right?
Mhm.
I think there was a time I was one of those kids when I was in
Yeah.
college who got the credit
Yeah.
cards and the bills would come and I just wouldn't open them.
It's like, it's not there. It's not there.
Right. Think my credit isn't being affected, but really recognizing that there is resilience in that story, and to give you an example, the mortgage lender that I went to, and she's like, nobody's going to give you a loan. 18 months or so, I go back and I'm like, I'm ready to buy a house, and she's like, oh, okay, what was your credit when you were here? And I don't remember what it was. I think it was high fives. And
Mhm.
she pulled it and she was astonished. She said that she could count on one hand the number of people that wouldn't qualify for a loan. And she told them, you need to go back, you need to look at these things and attend to these things. She said no one ever comes back. And so
Mhm.
thinking about, home ownership, I know that prices are high, but for a lot of people, they they have priced themselves out of the house because of their credit, right?
Right.
And that doesn't have to be. You can attend to what's in front of you to change that profile. And it opens opportunities, I think, not just for you personally, but also professionally. I
Right.
wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing if I didn't have my personal credit card. And I have been diligent and intentional. And the beautiful thing about it is that I'm at a point now where I could lose a few points on my credit profile, but I'm still active. I still have a great credit score.
Right.
Still be able to leverage what I need to leverage to do what I need to do in my business. And I think that's the quick
Hmm. Yeah, and the partnerships are paramount for that kind of thing too. So,
way.
speaking from a healed place, when you get into a partnership to where you may not have all the money, you may have a good credit, or you may have the knowledge. One of those three things is going to get you in the door.
Yep,
So, you got time, money, or knowledge, and you can you can get over any hurdle.
absolutely.
So, so thank you, Dr. June, for being on the show and giving us your insight. I really believe in what you're doing, and I look forward to all the great stuff that's going to happen because of what you're doing.
Thanks, LeBaron. I'd like to say the same to you. Thank you for the platform. Thank you for the opportunity to come on and talk to your audience, but also kudos to you for creating a space where folks can come on and really have conversation that we probably really should be having in middle and high school so that
Right.
we can be the best that we can be and we can live the lives we want to live.
Yep.
And the freedom that comes with making sure that our finances and our credit are in order.
Right. Right. And I'm developing a course for middle, elementary school kids, so
That's
that
wonderful.
will be forthcoming. So thank you guys for joining again. And again, this was Dr. June, and we absolutely appreciate you. And we'll see you next time.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Were you about to leave without hitting that like and subscribe button? I mean, you'll be back, right? So why not save yourself the hassle and just do it now? It's like putting your keys by the door, or packing your lunch, or packing 3 days before your flight and not the night of. It just makes life easier. Oh wait, did you just do it? I knew you had it in you. I appreciate that. See you next time. Same place, same channel. And remember, everything you need is inside of you.